Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we go with another episode where I get the great opportunity to speak with another accessibility practitioner. And today I am talking to Jill Bateman. Hello, Jill. How are you?
Great, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm talking from my home office on Vashon Island, which is a ferry ride away from Blink's Seattle headquarters. So where are you talking to us from?
I'm from Jackson, Ohio, and actually, originally I'm from Seattle, so I'm pretty familiar with Whidbey Island, and so that's great that you're out there.
Oh, all right. And what area were you living in? Was it Whidbey that you were on?
No, I was living in the city of Seattle. Actually, I grew up on the north side of Seattle in a place that's now called Shoreline.
Oh, all right, fabulous. So my wife's from that from that area. Well, it's good to have you as part of this program. And a good place for us always to start is if you'd just talk a little bit about your current role and the types of activities that make up your daily weekly life.
Sure thing. Right now, I'm working at Ohio University, and I'm the digital accessibility coordinator there. What makes up my daily life is just about everything. So there's only a couple of us that work in this field at the university, but we started something called the Ohio DAN, which is the Ohio Digital Accessibility Network, and we have about 130 people that are a part of that, and we meet monthly and try to encourage them to learn more about digital accessibility and improve digital accessibility in their everyday work. So that's been an extremely exciting part of our work. But we do everything from evaluating vendors to checking document accessibility to web accessibility. So we pretty much are spread pretty thin, but we're starting to get a pretty good network and a pretty good momentum in terms of getting the campus focused on digital accessibility and the importance of it. And we're pretty excited about that.
Well, I know as an instructor at the University of Washington, we would get missives about making materials accessible, and so I had a little experience with that in addition to being an accessibility professional. But it must be a very large and nonstop effort to try and make traditional class materials accessible.
Yes, it sure is. It feels like a mountain, and it certainly is a mountain. It's the mountain isn't necessarily about, I'm always trying to figure out what the mountain is about and how to climb it. Especially being from Seattle and spending time around a lot of mountains. Think about these kinds of things like how do you actually climb this thing? But the mountain is really not about people being jerks. It's really about not understanding how technology becomes the barrier and how much of a difference we can make in people's lives by just changing a few things about how we work. And by starting to change a few things about how we work, and really this is how I'm starting to get into usability and things like that, which is how I got into digital accessibility. But it starts to open our eyes in terms of who is using this tool, why is it there, how do I make it really communicate, what's the heart of the communication, what's the heart of what I'm doing. And I think that it's a really powerful way to get through to people, but I think for the most part people just don't know. And finding ways to start to chip away at that lack of knowledge, because once people figure out that, oh yeah, if I just create better headings, I'm going to go a long way toward making a more accessible document. Once you start to chip away at that lack of knowledge, or that lack of awareness, it's not really knowledge even, it's just a lack of awareness. Once you start to make that shift, people are excited about it, and they're excited about making sure that their work doesn't cause any barriers, because nobody really wants to create barriers, but getting that, it is a mountain to climb, getting that message out there to so many people. It's a high university is a pretty large university, but we're not alone in this. So we're starting to see some headway, and we're super excited about that.
Yeah, well, I totally appreciate that because you
And not
can
as
have,
big as University of Washington for sure.
yeah, you can have, you can have tools that have been vetted to be accessible, but then you know the instructors doing the work still, they're, it'll be like, well, I have PowerPoints and I'm not really sure what I need to do there, and then I have documents that I provide and PDFs, and so I think it becomes overwhelming, and yeah, but just providing constant nudges and tips and tricks and things like that. I think we're in accessibility, to me it's all about iteration and moving forward, as much as possible.
Absolutely. And I taught as well. And there's so much to it. And there's a part of teaching that's, as I was just an adjunct, so I probably would have gotten over this, but it's terrifying to stand in front of people at a university and say, listen to me, because I know what I'm talking about. It's like, oh man, there's so much that goes into putting a course together. It's a lot of work. And on top of that, we're saying, oh, and by the way, there's more work that needs to be done, but it's not necessarily, and I think that's the part I like to try and get across to people. It's not exactly more work. It's actually using the tool the way it's meant to be used. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to end up using the tool like PowerPoint or Word or even Excel, using it the way it was designed to be used, not really the way we've kind of hacked together and we've never really taken a class on how to use it. We end up being a lot more efficient with it as well, because all of a sudden now, I'm going back to headers again, but if you're in Word and you set up your headers in your styles, your overall document's going to look so much better, and it's going to be super fast to do because you've got your headers already styled. You just do it once, and that's just how you use the tool. So a big part of this is just learning how to use your tools more efficiently and more effectively.
Well,
Taking out the barriers.
well, I will definitely come back to your current work, but one of the things I like to do in this program is to find out, what things in our lived life and work life were, our first experiences with accessibility, and then kind of how we found our way into making it part of our professional activities. So, kind of going back in time, where did it start with you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I did not take a direct path by any stretch of the imagination. I actually graduated from Seattle University with a degree in communication journalism, and I worked in journalism. I worked in television news in Seattle, and ended up moving to Ohio. And I didn't really anticipate how rural this area was. But I ended up changing careers from journalism into public relations, and that's how I got involved at Ohio University. And throughout that process of changing my career, I started to get more and more involved in content and getting involved in how to communicate to people in a way that they understand it. And that's always been kind of the string that runs through my career. And probably about 2008, I ended up getting a master's degree, starting a master's program at the university, and got involved in user experience design. And one of the things that I focused on in user experience design was this idea of usability. This is a long story, but it's going to make sense. Usability really is the foundation that you build upon to create an extraordinary experience for people. But you can't ever create an extraordinary experience without usability. And somehow I put together, probably, I don't know exactly how, but ended up putting together that accessibility and usability had really similar heuristics. So they had really similar guidelines. The guidelines that are in usability are almost identical to those things that are in WCAG, for instance. And I had a really hard time convincing stakeholders that the product that we're creating, a website or web application or any kind of design, needs to be usable first. But I could do that with usability, with accessibility. I could use that extra leverage of saying, this is the law, this is the right thing to do, this is the moral thing to do. Oh, and by the way, it's also creates this foundation of usability you have to have before you can start to create extraordinary experiences. As I progressed through that, I was also drawn into my own family experience where my stepfather was starting to lose his vision through macular degeneration, because he had diabetes. And I started to see him know that he was going to lose his vision, which is a terrifying thing, but also knowing that, well, he also had significant hearing loss and he was aging, and he was a brilliant man. And I could see the effect of losing his vision and losing his hearing and his connection with his computer starting to disintegrate. Because I would come in and I could teach him how to use voiceover, and I could teach him how to use some of the technologies that are available for people with disabilities. But he would run into websites where it wouldn't work. He would blame himself, and he just got further and further away. And to this day, I still blame his disconnection from technology with his subsequent death, because he just gave up. He just started giving up on the world, and he started giving up on his treatments. So for me, it sounds a little bit dramatic, but it's kind of a life and death thing, that technology connects us to each other right now. That's where we're living. And if there are barriers there, which there are, and we have the ability to get rid of them, we have an obligation to do that. So I think that's really, if you ask me what the driving force of why I do that, that's probably a big part of where it is. I know it's going to make the tools more usable, not just for people with disabilities, but for everyone across the board. But for me personally, it's also that getting the barriers out of the way of people with disabilities so that they don't lose touch with each other and touch with us, because we need them and they need us, and we need to get those barriers out. Technology is the great connector, unless there's barriers there. So let's get the barriers out.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing your personal experience with that. Is definitely a very touching anecdote to hear about your personal experience with that. As part of that, you indicated that you had some experience with the voiceover and that type of thing. Just getting being able to understand what tools and technologies are part of accessibility is important. What was it for you? How did you have your own education about those types of things? Did it come through your university work?
I was really fortunate. I was a web developer before I got into this field, and our web team, we were able to hire an accessibility specialist, a web accessibility specialist, and I learned a lot from her. We worked together quite a bit, and she mentored me. We're still good friends, and that's where a lot of my education came from. She eventually left the university, and I was able to take a similar position to what she had and continue to build on the foundation she created. The rest of it has been Google searches, YouTube videos, everything I could find, because there really hasn't been, and there really isn't, it's frustrating, a really good academic program to learn how to become a web accessibility coordinator or a web specialist. Or there's a few things out there, but it's not, to me, at least in my experience, it isn't as mature as, say, going into the field, which is where I work, the field of security, where you've got all of these certifications and training courses and a lot of professional development that's available on a very high level that isn't necessarily there yet for accessibility. And that's frustrating, because it's just as valid and just as, in some cases, complicated. And I know that we tell people all the time, oh, there's really simple things you can do to improve accessibility, and that's true. But to really move the ball, some of that stuff's pretty deep and pretty complicated, and we could use a lot more training and validation and things like that. And IAAP does great with certification and things like that, but I think there could be more.
And with your work at the university, is it within your area to actually review tools and technologies that are being purchased by the university for use by students?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big part of what I do. And that's a big part of what the other person who works in our department does, is review tools and technologies for the university. We're continuously improving it, but we've spent a lot of time developing a process around purchasing. And I know it does frustrate our customers from time to time, but I think more and more they're coming to understand why we're doing this and why it's important and why it matters. We also have a policy about IT purchases, so it's a big part of who we are and what we're doing. It's not easy because we're asking our customers to explain to us why they're buying, what they're going to be using it for, what it is. And it's not always easy to describe ICT in information communications and technologies in simple terms. And so that can get frustrating for people. But for the most part, we have a pretty robust process for vetting out based on a risk-based process, trying to make sure that we're purchasing the most accessible technology that we can. One of the things that I'm really proud of that we've done this year is, in the last couple of years really, is worked with EDUCAUSE to create an additional 13 questions to something called the HECVAT, which is the higher education. Oh, wow. I'm going to draw a blank on this. Higher education community vendor template, a vendor purchasing.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Thanks. We'll put it in the show notes. Absolutely. Anyway, it's a template that security professionals use that asks vendors to tell higher education how secure their tool is, how secure their technology is. We added 13 accessibility questions to that template. It's not just a security template. It's an overall vendor assessment tool. That's the AT assessment tool that helps universities determine how accessible and how mature this company is in their accessibility journey. And I think it's going to do a lot of good for colleges and universities making purchases.
And you talking about that made me think that I don't even really know, does the university systems are there like standards or best practices? Do you share your templates and ideas, or is every institution essentially its own island trying to make their way into this area of vetting products?
That's a really good question. It's not an easy thing to answer. In Ohio, we've tried to create kind of a consortium around accessibility. It's a lot harder than it seems like. It seems like it should be that we all review the same things, we share the reviews with each other, and if somebody's reviewed that this company, here's our results, and you don't have to review it. But everyone has a different use case on each of these products, and some of these companies have 20 products, so it's almost impossible to do that. Having said that, organizations like EDUCAUSE, where hundreds and hundreds of universities, accessibility professionals come together and share our best practices, is really a good start to doing just that. I don't know that we're ever going to get to the point where we can fully support each other, but we're trying to get there. We're trying to get that. And again, just like accessibility, it's progress, not perfection. So we're trying to take steps to get closer and closer to that goal of, let's make this a little bit easier on each other.
Well, as you kind of look forward into the future, are there any new initiatives that you're excited about, or are there things that maybe you wish could be moving faster, or areas that you think our profession needs to be particularly? I can tell you're kind of laughing about that, all right? Because there's often a lot of things, but
There's a lot of things.
what might be a couple of one or two focus points that are always at the top of your mind?
Oh, wow. It's a tough one to answer because I want it all fixed. I mean, I look at the WebAIM million website project that comes out every year, and I just get so discouraged by that. Every year, it seems like we're just not making the progress that we need to. I'm not a big fan of laws, and I'm not a big fan of regulations. I'm a big fan of people doing things out of the goodness of their hearts, but we know that not everyone's good. And we also need to have other motivations. So I'm hoping the Duckworth bill that's kind of come up is actually going to give us some lift in raising the awareness about accessibility and encouraging businesses and organizations across the country to improve the accessibility of websites and improve the accessibility of web applications. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think, I know that a restaurant is not going to, out of the goodness of their heart, create parking spots for disabled customers. I know that there has to be some legislation there, that has to be some teeth behind the legislation. And the same is probably true for websites as well, because it is hard. It's, we can't kid ourselves into saying this is a piece of cake. It's a journey, particularly when that thing is already built. As we shift left and get more into the design phase of our agile practices, though, I think we're going to start to see some changes. I think if we start to see changes in university programs, particularly in computer science programs, that don't just have an accessibility class. I think accessibility classes are not the answer. I think the answer is integrating accessibility throughout the coding curriculum. And same thing with the design curriculum in art schools. Once we start seeing that, we're going to start seeing some real changes.
Well, yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Are the students starting to move back, or are you already into classes, or when do things start going again for you?
Tuesday. They start up again Tuesday. So they've had quite a break for this winter break, but yeah, they're coming back here very quickly. So we're gearing up for that. We're quite swamped.
I know again from my own experience that everything's really quiet, and then suddenly there's this
Suddenly it's
crush
not.
and melee.
Yes,
Well,
I'm looking forward to it.
it was great having this opportunity to chat with you, and hopefully we'll meet up together at a physical event at some point or other.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure, Joe. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.